Welcome. This week we will be covering monitoring, evaluation, and learning. This step of ESP development includes developing the plan's MEL framework, consisting of an M&E results matrix, key performance indicator matrix, and organizational arrangements. This presentation will be split in 3 parts: the purpose and meaning of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, or MEL, the preconditions for an effective MEL of education sector plans, and the main elements of the ESP MEL framework. Please note that this PowerPoint just provides a brief overview, so do refer to the Unit 3 MEL Handbook for a more in-depth explanation of these concepts. We will start with the purpose and meaning of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. First, take a few seconds to reflect. Why do you think that the ESP includes a chapter on monitoring, evaluation, and learning? Why is MEL important and relevant for the plan? Well, while there are many purposes of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, some of the key purposes, in a nutshell, particularly important for ESP implementation, are: MEL helps us to make informed and timely decisions about implementation and take corrective actions, enhancing the achievement of results of the plan. It helps us to better manage risks and opportunities by anticipating them, allowing for better planning and budgeting. It allows us to gain better knowledge and experience for better results, learning what works well and what does not. Through learning about both our successes and our failures, we can improve implementation and create a culture of feedback of information. Finally, MEL also helps to enhance accountability and commitment among stakeholders by demonstrating the results achieved with money spent and evidence that the initiative produced expected results. Let's now look at the purposes of each of the elements of MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, one by one, and how they relate to the ESP. Monitoring is defined as a continuing function all throughout plan implementation that uses systematic collection of data on specified indicators to provide management and stakeholders with indications on the progress in plan implementation, the use of allocated resources, and the achievement of results. In terms of the ESP, monitoring helps to verify if plan implementation is on track with regards to inputs, activities, and results. The data from monitoring activities can then be used for planning and decision-making. This may involve taking remedial action if things are not on track. Some basic questions that monitoring helps answer are: what is the level of inputs or resources used? How efficiently are inputs being used? What is the level of activities implemented? Are activities being carried out as planned? Are the predefined outputs being produced as planned and efficiently? Are we on track? Are expected outcomes met? What are the issues, risks, and challenges that we face or foresee that need to be taken into account to ensure the achievement of results? And what corrective actions might be needed to ensure delivery of the intended results? Evaluation, on the other hand, is the systematic assessment of an ongoing or completed plan or program, including its design, implementation, and results, in order to assess the relevance of the strategies and fulfillment of objectives with the purpose of informing decision-making. Evaluation also looks at issues related to efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. Evaluation helps us to assess the design, implementation, and results of the plan. It helps us explain why and how a plan has been successful, and what factors can help explain failures in order to ultimately achieve results. Evaluation helps answer basic questions, such as, has the plan achieved its objectives? What strategies have been successful, and which ones have been less successful? Why have strategies been successful? What factors explain failures to achieve intended results? What lessons can be learned for the future? And what decisions can be taken based on the findings? Learning involves the synthesis and application of information and insights from multiple sources to build knowledge. Learning helps us to understand what is and is not working and assists in determining if a solution is effective and remains relevant. Learning should be broadly shared to inform others working on similar problems. Monitoring and evaluation are an integral part of plan management. They are different but complementary and should be integrated. Planning for monitoring must be done with evaluation in mind. Monitoring allows us to understand where we are going along the way, while in evaluation, we stop and assess what was achieved. Evaluation complements monitoring by providing an independent and in-depth assessment of what worked and what did not work, and why this was the case. Learning occurs incrementally and iteratively over time and is used to reflect on how a plan is meeting its intended and unintended changes. Now that you hopefully understand and agree with why MEL is important for ESP implementation, let's look at the preconditions for an effective monitoring and evaluation of sector plans. There are two major preconditions. First, a logical and well-constructed plan with clear results statements. And second, effective information systems. We will begin with the first one, a logical, well-constructed plan with clear results statements. You may be thinking, logical, well-constructed plan? That sounds like a good idea, but what do you mean by clear results statements? Good question. Let's start by defining what a result is. A result is defined as a change in a state or a condition that is the consequence of a cause and effect relationship. An intervention, the cause, leads to change in a state, the effect. For example, by providing an intervention, such as a course, you can lead to a result, like a change in knowledge levels. As you see in the figure on this slide, inputs and activities are related to the intervention or implementation, what you do, while outputs, outcomes, and impacts are the different possible levels of results. Together, the 5 levels form the results chain, shown on the next slide. The results chain links together inputs, what is invested, and activities, what you do, with various levels of results, or what you hope to achieve, related to outputs, what is produced, outcomes, changes in behaviors and institutions, and finally, impact, changes in development conditions. The result chain essentially tells us what stakeholders want to achieve as a direct result of the activity output, what they want to achieve in the longer term outcomes, and how they will go about it, inputs and activities. As you can see in this example, your inputs, what is invested, such as financial resources, equipment, time, and personnel, allow you to implement activities, such as training and recruitment, which allows you to produce outputs, such as goods and services, which can lead to outcomes, changes in behaviors, ultimately contributing to impacts, overall social, economic, or cultural changes. For example, if you provide the inputs of qualified tutors and training materials, you can implement the activity of in-service teacher training, leading to the output of better trained and qualified teachers, which contributes to the outcome of improved learning, ultimately contributing to a higher quality education system. We know that these concepts might be a little confusing. Let's take a quick quiz to make sure that you are clear on the difference between output and outcome results. Don't worry, it's not graded. First, is computer equipment provided to primary schools an output or an outcome level result? Take a few seconds to think. The correct answer is output. It is an immediate, concrete result that comes from a combination of inputs and activities. Next, is a training program on the monitoring and evaluation of the ESP delivered an output or an outcome level result? The correct answer is output. Again, it is a short-term result that comes from a combination of inputs and activities. Lastly, is improved engagement of boys in reading lessons an output or outcome level result? The correct answer is outcome. It refers to a medium-term accomplishment, an actual change in a social actor's behavior due to the target population benefiting from outputs. Did you get them right? If not, you might want to take a closer look at the Unit 3 MEL workbook to go over these concepts again. Different types of indicators are required to assess progress towards results. If we look again at the results chain and how indicators are used, we can see that the type of indicators we choose need to relate to the different levels of the results chain that we want to measure. Indicators of inputs measure the financial, administrative, and regulatory resources provided for implementing the plan. For example, the share of budget devoted to education. Indicators of output measure the immediate and concrete consequences of the different activities implemented and inputs used. Since outputs are tangible and deliverable, their indicators may be easier to identify. In fact, the output itself may be measurable and serve as its own indication of whether or not it has been produced. For example, number of schools built or number of educational planners trained. Indicators of outcome measure the intermediate results or consequences of outputs at the level of the beneficiaries, intermediate results. This could include, for example, school enrollment and levels of learners' achievements. Indicators of impact measure the long-term and aggregated results or changes at the level of the beneficiaries, long-term results. They describe the changes in people's lives and development conditions at national level and beyond, such as literacy rates or GDP growth. Monitoring and evaluation becomes easier and more useful when there is a clear linkage between objectives, indicators, and targets, and between the inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, when there are clear indicators and targets corresponding to each level of the results chain, and when objectives and results are well formulated and precise. Clear results chains and clear results statements are therefore important for monitoring and evaluation because it helps us to make the link between expected results explicit, identify what was achieved and what was not achieved at what level, and identify the possible causes of non-achievement. Let's now look at the second precondition for effective M&E, effective information systems. In order to carry out monitoring and evaluation and be able to measure the achievement of set objectives, you will need reliable and timely information, especially from MS. The National MS is the most important information source for the construction of an indicator system, without which no efficient M&E system is possible. In many countries, obtaining and processing the necessary data for national statistics remains a persistent problem. 3 critical issues can be observed and should be addressed. First, the scope of the information system. It is often limited to the data obtained through the annual school census, with no data on, for example, classroom processes and management type and capacity, which may constrain the type of objective results to be selected. The integration of data / fragmentation of data sources is another problem often faced. The indicator system relies on various and heterogeneous sets of data, such as MES, budget, human resources, learning assessments and examinations, inspectors' reports, household surveys, etc., that are often not centralized, making their collection particularly time-consuming. In some cases, it is the format of certain data that makes their direct use and analysis complex. It is common, for example, for cost and financing data or human resources data to be stored in formats that do not ease analyses, such as hard copies, limited disaggregation, etc. Another point relates to the quality of the statistical information, such as timeliness, coverage, and reliability of data, that is sometimes a concern, partly due to the lack of sufficient competent staff and the poor conditions in which MS units are operating. These issues seriously limit the construction and use of indicators for monitoring some important areas of the plan. When defining objectives and related indicators, it will be important to anticipate how to measure them. There may need to be a drop in an indicator if it happens to be too complex to monitor. In addition, if needed, ensure the education sector plan includes a component geared to the strengthening of the local MS. We now know why MEL is important for the ESP implementation and what the preconditions are for effective monitoring and evaluation of plans. But what about how MEL is actually covered within the ESP document? Remember we said that there is a MEL chapter within the ESP. Well, this chapter usually includes a MEL framework made up of first, an M&E results matrix, describing the outcomes that the ESP hopes to achieve, and for each of them, the priority outputs with indicators, baselines, and intermediate and final targets for each outcome and priority output. Second, a matrix of key performance indicators. And third, the organizational setup. Additional key tools and templates may also be included as annexes. Through these 3 main elements, the MEL framework within the ESP therefore describes what is to be monitored and evaluated, how the information will be used and by whom, when monitoring and evaluation activities should take place, including the timing and frequency, who is responsible for ESP monitoring and evaluating activities, such as data collection, analysis, and reporting, how monitoring and evaluation are carried out, such as what data sources and which methods for data collection and analysis, and what resources are needed to carry out MEL activities. Please now watch the next PowerPoint presentation, which will go into more detail on the ESP MEL framework, including how to develop an M&E results matrix for your own priority program.